Like,
We can fix that.
I'll ask.
for the
Oh, right, they do.
lock behind me.
Sorry, what?
Okay.
That's up to Don. He's got everything from, he's got the box, he's got the papers. I gave him Larry. Oh, Larry, no. He's supposed to be the
Person running up and down the steps?
Looks like
I'll have my back by your I know he's, okay, and I know he's planning on coming because he's the only one that showed up today.
Really? It was just you and him?
Just me and Larry.
Okay, welcome everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:01. Roll call. Looks like everyone's here. We'll need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
second.
Any? Mike, who was the second? Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll move into board vacancy candidate introduction and interviews. I'll hand it over to the entity. Thank you.
This on? Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Don Jamtas, and I'll be taking this part of the meeting to introduce the candidates. And the procedure will be each candidate applicant will come up one at a time and address the board with a statement. There's two that aren't going to be here, so they will have statements read that they've submitted. And after that's all done, then the board has an opportunity then to ask questions of the candidates after they've read their statement. After that's all done, and each candidate then takes a seat in the audience when they've read their statement. Then we will have a ballot selection, and each board member has a ballot that we'll fill out with names, and I'll go collect them, and we'll go downstairs and count. And it's going to take a vote of 5 to elect a new candidate, a new board member, a majority. And so if there's no winner, if there's no clear winner, we'll keep voting until there is. The board does have an option to suspend the rules, and after the first 2 votes, if there's still no clear winner, the board has the option to suspend the rules so we can start dropping candidates off that get the lowest participation. And so if that's understood.
Question?
Yeah.
So is now a good time for, if there's any candidates in the room, to go downstairs, or, I don't know.
Yeah, candidates
Wanna
are all
make that clear to
downstairs,
everyone.
and they'll be brought up in the order on the agenda.
Okay.
And so first one will be Alma Decker.
Andrew?
The time limit for the candidate to speak is 5 minutes, did you say?
As long as it takes them to read their prepared statement.
Okay. And then is there a time limit on questions and answers from the board?
I don't believe so. No time limit was set.
Okay.
So the first candidate is Alma Deckert, and speak clearly into the microphone so the streaming can record well, and address your statements to the board. And then when you're done, they will have an opportunity to ask questions, if any.
Okay. I'm Alma Deckert. I've come to be considered for appointment on the open seat on the board for the simple reason that I believe that I am in a position to represent some of the voices in the community that have been screaming to be heard, and I do believe that somebody like that should be considered for the open position on the board for the simple reason that, you know, such a voice is necessary out here right now. I'm sorry if I'm not being very coherent tonight. I haven't really prepared anything. I've spent the last week chasing down my mom in a nursing home. She's had a stroke, so I'm not in the best shape here. Most of you know me already, and you know most of what my views and opinions are, and most of the subjects under consideration in the Valley right now. So basically, I'm just going to step back and say, if you've got anything direct to ask me, please do.
Alma, I was going to ask probably all of the candidates the same question. Sudden Valley has posted rules and regulations on the website. We have some members who complain that these rules and regulations aren't being enforced, and then there are other members who complain that they're too strict and should be removed. If you were selected as a member of the board, how would you address this?
By using common sense. I would hope that looking at something like that, it would become obvious that, you know, what the applicability of the rules to the context in which they are applied should be taken at face value, what the rules are supposed to be addressing. If there is a situation where things are happening because they're not being applied tightly enough, then they need to be tightened. If there's a situation where they're too tight and people are not being heard simply because everything's getting slammed down with a no before the question's fully answered, then they need to be loosened. But I think they need to be dealt with at individual level.
Hi, Alma. Good seeing you. Sorry to hear about your issues, but thanks for coming. You know, obviously there's limitations on what you can do as a board member, but
Right.
Where would you like to see Sudden Valley head to this year? Like, what kind of changes would you like to see happen, and you know, what would be your vision for the Valley?
I'd like to see things start getting more settled. I'd like to see the people in this valley, and by that I mean the community, the actual people in this valley, start living here with a certain degree of peace of mind, of understanding of where they are and where they're headed, and have a lot less uncertainty and division that has been going on. I mean, I don't know, I got 3 of these in the last 2 weeks. I don't know how many of you got these things, and if whether or not you live in Gates that get these things, but these are the vultures that are gathering. The people who buy houses as they are, because people are desperate to sell to get out of here. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of families that I have heard of, and there are some people that I know who are leaving or are talking about leaving or have maybe wanting to consider Sudden Valley but no longer are because of the issues that we are facing right now. That is something I want to deal with. That is something I think desperately needs to be addressed. This community needs to be put on a more even keel and a more open communicative situation where the people who live here feel that they're being heard to a sufficient level so they don't feel that their only option is to sell to someone who's going to buy their house for cash.
Alma, thanks for being here, and nice to see you again as well. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of Sudden Valley?
Home.
Thank you.
I also want to just thank you for being here in a tough week for you. Given that part of the duties under the RCWs of a director include acting in the interest of the corporation, what synergies exist between your current or past experiences and the experience that you see as being needed to fulfill that obligation as a board member?
think that we're touching ever so slightly on more general politics. I believe, and I strongly believe, that we should not be going down the road of Citizens United. Corporations are not people. It's the people who are the corporations. And I feel that the corporation should be guided by its membership, its people, its citizenry, if you like. The responsibility to the corporation begins with the responsibility to the people who make it up.
Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
Hi, Alma. Thank you for coming. Sorry about your mom. Really sorry. You said that you think of home when you think of Sudden Valley. I was just wondering, how long have you lived here, and do you foresee yourself leaving the valley?
It will be 17 years in February that we've been here. So we've been here for a while. I've seen a lot of water flow under the bridge here. I've seen a lot of things happen here. Some of you may or may not know that my husband had a major stroke 3 months after he moved here. My husband is disabled. My life in the house that I live in has basically been slowly built up over all these 17 years so that we can exist in that house, live in that house, given the fact that he is disabled and that he needs certain things to survive. So for us, unlike a lot of other people maybe, the question of just, dropping everything, selling up and moving is much more fraught than that. I'm sure we can't be the only people in that situation. There's lots of families here with their own issues. There's lots of elderly people here with their own issues for whom just dropping things and going somewhere is not really an option. You can't just move. Buying a house, selling a house and buying a house, they're not fungible, they're not interchangeable. There's a lot of things that need to be taken care of in that. So in terms of I don't want to go anywhere. This is home. This has been home since we moved here. We put a lot of love into our house. We put a lot of living into our house. And that is something that I've said to somebody recently. The people should move to Sudden Valley for living and not for lifestyle. And basically that is the bottom line of a lot of expectations here. Excuse me, my voice is going like crazy. So in terms of moving anywhere, I don't want to go. And if you pushed me to it, if you told me if I had to move, I don't know where I would go. So I'm basically committed to Sudden Valley in a major way. And in one sense, that is why I'm here. I want to put that commitment to this situation to try and be a part of the solution.
thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll have the next applicant.
Thank you.
So the next applicant is David Holland, and address the board, and when you're done, they'll ask questions,
Okay.
if there's any, and then you're free to take a seat.
Good evening, everybody. I believe in brevity, so my name is David Holland. Just really quick, I've lived in Sudden Valley since 1994. Married, one child. Ask me your questions.
Okay, same question. Sudden Valley has posted rules and regulations on the website. We have some members who complain that these rules and regulations aren't being enforced, and there are other members who complain that they are too strict and should be removed. If you were selected as a member of the board, how would you address this?
Addressing how the rules need to be applied, is what you're saying?
You've had complaints from two sides of the membership. You're a board member. What do you do?
Have to listen to both sides of the equation and then step back and look and see what is best to do for the community and as a whole.
Mr. President, AJ.
Thank you for coming today. I guess I'd just like to know, what sort of vision you see for Sudden Valley moving forward. There's obviously a lot of discussion happening right now around our community and in our community. So just kind of curious as to, what types of things would you like to work on, in your time on the board and where your efforts would be focused.
First and foremost, I think we have a very beautiful community and we have a lot of potential for this community. I would like to see us first work on the infrastructure itself, maintaining the roads, thinning the trees that we need to do that are dangerous to the community as a whole. Once that is set and we are in the black, then I think it's probably prudent for us to look at improving what we have, maybe rebuilding if we need to, and then trying to expand that and moving forward to make this a true destination.
Mr. President, Andrew.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
For being here. When was the last time you learned something new, and what was it?
Today, actually. I work for a medical company, which I'll remain nameless at the moment, and I'm assuming you want to know anything that I learned new. It doesn't matter. Okay. Particular application that we're using has some quirks to it, and so I've learned how to determine what those quirks are and work around them. I don't want to bore everybody with the technical details of what it is, though, so sorry.
Mr. President,
According to the Washington State RCWs, one of the responsibilities, a legal duty of a director includes acting in the best interests of the corporation. Given that, what synergies exist between your current or past experiences and the experiences that you see as being needed on this board to fulfill that obligation?
Communication is key to everything. Sorry. The roles that I had outside of, outside of here, required me to speak to diverse groups of people. Again, I'm in the medical field. I've been dealing with all sorts of people, patients, doctors, or tertiary people to that. So being able to listen is key. And then communicating at a level that everybody can understand clearly and succinctly is the second.
Thank you. Also, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. President, Whitney.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd just like to know if you are currently or have you in the past volunteered with some of the committees that Sudden Valley offers, and if so, what were they?
Unfortunately, with my prior jobs in the 26 years I've lived here, I have not had the opportunity to do that. With the exception of, it's not necessarily a committee, but the Sudden Valley Auxiliary Communication Service, I'm part of that, and I think Mike is too, as a matter of fact. So, but no, I have not had the opportunity to be part of, an active part of the community in that respect.
Mr. President, Steffi.
Hi, thanks for coming. So you've volunteered a little bit here then. Do you have other experience, other volunteer roles?
Oh, actually, outside of this, yeah.
I'm like, I assume you
But
do.
not with Sudden Valley proper, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to. But actually, yes, the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, their Emergency Communications Center, the ECC is what it's called as well. So I volunteer with that as well, part of the Whatcom County Emergency Response.
Mr. President, Josh.
So
go fix those issues. I received a lot of training in areas of like diversity, leading teams, lean manufacturing, employee development. And when I think back, a lot of that was learning to, when I first heard about diversity, I thought, oh, that's people of color. And really what I learned was it's more about people's life experience, their professional experiences, where they came from. I had an opportunity to work with people from all over the world, all over the country. And I had to learn how to listen, and just to really listen to what they had to say. And sometimes I didn't understand them very well, and so I needed to ask a lot of questions. So I feel like that's one of the skills that I bring forward is the ability to communicate and to listen to people, to be teachable. Also learned that any important decision that we needed to make, either professionally and even personally, it really needs to come down to facts and data. What are the facts and data? especially when in areas of expenditures of monies, going out and improving a process. What does the data say to us? And use that data to make decisions. Goals and plans for Sudden Valley. I'd really like to see us steadily improving our livelihoods here, to have increase the productivity, safety, things like that within the administration. As you guys know, that we learned in orientation, as directors, as a board, your role is to provide governance and to set the policies, and then the administration goes and deploys those. But I have a lot of experience in how to improve things, and I would like an opportunity to be able to try to help do that. I would like to see us take a really hard, better look at the reserve study. I think there's some data in there that's may not be correct, so that we can go forward with good data that we can plan from. And I think that with that previous comment about a better livelihood, I think that we need to have dues that we can plan for, that we can see, that we know what's happening down the road. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Well, a couple of things I want to share. So I mentioned that when we moved here in 2017, I don't sit on my hands real well, and I looked for an opportunity to get involved. And at that time, live streaming of the meetings was starting to occur, and I noticed the communications chair would often get up from his seat at the table and go back and be touching the board, and I thought that's probably pretty hard to work the board and also engage in the meeting. And something that I like to do is deal with sound, so I offered to help in the communication committee. Also love to be down at the marina, so I got involved down there. Admin asked me to help out as the harbor master down there, so spent a lot of time talking to people about boating safety, trying to help out in those areas. Current member of the ACC, and I'm bringing this stuff up just to mainly say that I think I have a pretty good understanding of where the hierarchy of where the board is, committees, how our association works. And from that, I have some ideas on how we can improve, because we can constantly improve. And I think that's all that I've got from a statement standpoint. Any questions for me?
Mr.
Sure.
President Josh.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
So you've been involved in quite a bit of things here at Sudden Valley. What's one thing that the association does or has done that you would do differently?
Well, I think one of the things that I would do differently is that I would have really good metrics that we as a community, as volunteers, we can see how things are performing in terms of productivity, safety, morale. I would have good metrics so that we can have make better decisions.
Mr. President Lester.
I have a standard question from me. Sudden Valley has posted rules and regulations on the website. We have some members who complain that these rules and regulations aren't being enforced, and there are other members who complain that they are too strict and should be removed. If you were selected as a member of the board, how would you deal with these two conflicting comments from the members?
I would do what I'm doing now. I like to communicate with people face to face. I'd like to sit down and have a conversation so I can better understand. I would want to know where people feel that a rule or a policy is incorrect. And for those that think it's a good thing, I'd like to be able to know about that. As a member of the ACC, we often go out and talk to community members about projects that they'd like to that they'd like to have done. And a lot of those projects they want to do violate the rule. And we'll sit down and explain to them why. A lot of people don't understand why they can't have a 6-foot fence right on the property line. And we talk about that we're a wildlife preserve and the wildlife need a way to be able to move within the valley. So I think a lot of times it's helping people understand why the rule is what the rule is and listen to them. And I think a lot of us who are on the ACC, in that particular example I cited, would say that we walked away having had a good conversation. People feel pretty good about it.
Madam President Paul, Mr. President, I apologize.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, Paula.
According to Washington State RCWs, the legal duties of a director include acting in the best interests of the corporation. Given that, what synergies exist between your current or past experiences and the experience that you see as being needed on this board to meet that obligation?
Well, could you repeat that? Let me try to understand the question. Sorry.
That's okay. I'll just read the second part. What synergies exist between your current experiences or your past experiences, maybe for Boeing, and the experience that you see as being needed on this corporation, on this board, to meet the obligations of the RCWs?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really used to working in a regulated industry. We had the FAA coming to us, auditing us, providing requirements. And I think it's a similar thing with the directors. There is state law, there are bylaws within the community, and the role is to follow those processes. And I don't mean to sound flip, but I once had an auditor come in, and they were observing our process, and they had a problem with what we were doing. And we're like, well, no, we're meeting this, and they said, no, I'm reading this section word for word. This is what it says. And frankly, Rob, if it said that machine operator should have a pink tutu on while he's running the machine, I expect to see him wearing a pink tutu. And I think that the role is to make sure that we understand what are the requirements and ensuring that we are setting policy that meets those requirements. And there's a set of them. In the orientation, our attorney helped us understand that it flows down from the RCW down through our bylaws from Roberts.
Mr. President, Andrew.
Sorry to the audience here. Rob, what's the first word that comes to mind when you think of Sudden Valley?
Awesome.
All right.
I love Sudden Valley. It's awesome here. I mean, we have one side of Lake Waccamaw, we have beautiful trees and wildlife. We actually have it down on the water as well. But I mean, one day you could go for a hike and finish it up out on the water. I love it here. This place is awesome.
Mr. President, Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. So, social media, it can be pretty ugly. What are your feelings? And
I get on social media. Sometimes I'll put stuff out there and I'm like, did I really need to put that out there? Hopefully I haven't put anything out there that somebody feels hurt by. I would much rather have a conversation with somebody. Many times I've said to people, let's have a cup of coffee, and I've meant it. I used to tell the people that reported to me on Teams, if you are on the third reply on an email, then get up from your desk and go over and see them. Stop replying. And yet what I know is that the social media has just really become a way that people communicate. it is one way to get the pulse, I guess, you know. I mean, you can pick up the pulse, but when people I'm just gonna say, when people post personal information, hurtful, attacking things, it bothers me, and I in no way condone that. But I've also, an organization that I volunteer for, we were talking about using Facebook as a way to market the organization, and it's really, you know, it's kind of a two-edged sword, I guess, you know. There are some good things about it. I found boat parts on Facebook. And that's a good thing.
Any more questions? Okay, thanks, Rob.
Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for your time and listening, guys.
Quick question, is Daniel not here?
Daniel is not here. He's not present and apparently did not submit a statement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I was going to mention that at the end. Yeah. So our next candidate is now Karen Borchert.
Hello. This feels a little bit familiar. My name is Karen Borchert. Just for a little introduction, I've lived here for about 5 years with my husband and my 3 kids. My background is that I have a degree in finance, and even though I'm a stay-at-home mom currently, I worked for about 10 years in various aspects of that. I started out in an accounting firm, and then I moved into corporate finance. So I've done a bit of consulting, as well as budgeting, forecasting, finding cost savings, looking at financial statements, etc. My Sun Valley experience is that I've served on several committees here. I started not too long after I moved here. I joined the Long Range Planning Committee. They had an opening, and I wanted to just get to know a little bit more about the community. I want this to be my forever home. I'm raising my family here, and so I got involved in long range planning. Shortly after that, I was appointed to a vacancy on ACC, and then was subsequently elected to a position there. Currently, I serve on the Finance Committee and also on the Parks and Trails Committee, and actually helped to get that committee started. I was one of 4 Sun Valley Strong members that petitioned for the special assessment to create the Recreation Department and to fund our parks, pools, gym, and then include equal access to all our members for that. And as of November, that department is expected to come out with about a $17,000 net income. So we are on target for that. I tell you my experience not just because I want to have like a laundry list of things that I've done here, but I think it shows, number one, that I have an understanding of various aspects of the organization, of how things work. I know, for instance, from ACC, I know how new builds are approved. I've been down to the basement of the admin building, and I've seen the electrical down there, and I know the shape of that. I'm familiar with the reserve study from being on the Finance Committee, and throughout my service, I have worked with various members of staff, of the board, and of the community in order to affect positive change. I also feel that I'm solution and goal-oriented. I'm not the kind of person that likes to just talk about an issue or even just talk about a solution, but I think I've demonstrated an ability to put those discussions into a plan and then act on it, and then continue to stick with it and make it positive for the community. I believe I've also demonstrated a collaborative spirit through the committees that I've worked on. Committees are a really great experience. I think they give you an opportunity to meet with different people. You start out with very different perspectives and different opinions, and to come together at the end, finding common goals and common ground, and then building from there. So that's me in a nutshell. Any questions? Joshua.
I was waiting for it to be official. Okay. Hi, Karen. Good to see you again.
Thank you. You too.
There's hot news right now about dues based around assessed property values. And being a numbers person, what is your opinion on that?
I just barely read that. What I'm reading about what it is right now is a percentage of the collective assessed value of the association. I think there are some positive things to that where it gives, you know, just like our taxes do, it gives people a little bit of a break that might be in a tougher financial position, and maybe some people that can afford it more, you know, are able to pay more for dues. It's definitely not, assessed value is definitely not an indicator of disposable income, so it's not perfect. I think there are some challenges with that way of doing things as well, which is, for one, I worry about what kind of an accounting nightmare that might, you know, because you don't have just a set amount per person, and so in order to be reconfiguring those percentages or whatever all of the time, I think that could create some difficulty there. The idea of assessed value has been talked about for a long time. And I personally have not run the numbers, and I'm curious if anyone has. In my mind, it kind of means that half the people will be paying more than now, and half will be paying less. And with about 400 condos and I think 500 undeveloped lots, you know, that doesn't leave a lot of single family homes that would be paying less than they are now. And so I think before we were to, if this was the community pursuing something like that, we'd really, really want to run the numbers and understand that, because I wouldn't want people going into it thinking that they were going to come out differently than how they really would. So.
Mr. President, Steffi.
I have a second part to that.
Sure.
Thanks for coming. So then overall, do you think that the state should be enforcing or creating our laws on how to collect funds or assess dues?
My personal opinion is that I think things are best managed locally. I am not a politician. I really would prefer to stay out of the state's business if it were. If they are determined that, they're looking at the entire state and they have their reasons for doing that, and we'll just have to roll with it. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, we need to focus on our community, our issues, and develop the solutions that work best here, and then work with that within whatever laws the state has passed for us to follow.
Mr. President, Leslie.
Yeah, I was wondering, Sudden Valley has posted rules and regulations to the website, and we have some members who complain that these rules and regulations aren't being enforced. On the other hand, there are other members who complain that they're too strict and they should be done away with. If you were selected as a member of the board, how would you go about addressing both opinions?
Whether rules should be enforced more or whether...
You're given a problem, you've been contacted by two different opinions. Now, you as a board member, what do you do?
Well, I think that's a tough one, and number one is to, I think, assess how big of a problem it is. Is this one person's problem or is this more pervasive? And I think that kind of would determine how much time and effort you put into it. Not that we shouldn't enforce our rules, but if it's, you know, just happening very sporadically, that's not, maybe not something that the board would spend as much time as if it was something that was happening frequently. The other thing I think to keep in mind is what is the purpose of an HOA? Well, we exist to kind of protect home values. So any decisions that we make should be made in those best interests. And so it's always finding the balance between sometimes enforcing rules too strictly, you know, people shy away from that. But then having rules that can't be enforced, then what's the point anyway? A while ago when I was on ACC, in fact, we had the director of security at the time kind of come to us and talk about, here's some rules that you have that we find very difficult to enforce, and here's why. And so if we made the decision like, yes, this is worth it, we need to go and we need to enforce these better, I would want to have a discussion with the people enforcing it and saying, how can we make this easier for you to do? You don't want to set rules that almost have no way of being enforced. You want to make that something that can be easily done without, you know, creating a whole administrative problem from that.
Mr. President Baldwin.
According to the Washington State RCWs, the legal duties of a director include acting in the best interests of a corporation, among others. Given that, what synergies exist between your current or past experiences and the experience that you see as being needed on this board to meet that obligation?
So I would say the first thing that you would need in order to act in the best interest of the corporation would be to understand the corporation. And I think having the experience, not just the length, but the diverse experience that I have had would give me kind of a unique opportunity to be able to do that. Back when I worked in corporate finance, you kind of see the jokes of accountants and they're in their little cubbies and they never talk to anyone, but that is very much not the case. We always worked side by side with the business so that we knew what issues they were facing, how we could better help, and so we were aligned very closely with them. And so I think that's equally important on a board, is to really understand the issues and the challenges with staff here, communicating with the membership as well, and then bringing those all together to kind of build that foundation like I talked about before, build that foundation of things where we have common ground or common goals, and then build from there. And I think I've kind of established some of those relationships and then have that diverse understanding of how things work now. Plus, I have a pretty, still, I'm a little nervous to say this because there's still so much to learn, but a fairly good understanding of the financial aspect of how the corporation works. And so I think that definitely helps. I love to get into the details of things and really dig into it and problem solve and see what drivers and levers are going to make things work differently. And so I think that I could bring that to the table as well, being detail oriented and also having a focus on the big picture.
Mr. President, Andrew.
Karen, this is you again. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of Sudden Valley?
It's beautiful. I absolutely love this place. All of this aside, this is the most community-oriented place I've ever lived, and it is gorgeous. I mean, I wake up every day so happy that I get to provide my kids with this experience, to live in the woods, with the wildlife, with the various, opportunities they have, to go to the lake. There's hiking all around, in and through the neighborhood and getting better. There's other things, right? Lookout Mountain and all that. And it's just gorgeous, and it's peaceful when you can set this part aside.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
The next applicant is David Narsico. Where do I sit? Oh, right there, okay. Hello. So I understand I have a few minutes to say a few words first. And I'm thinking over the quite a few months and actually years, you've got lots of things that I've written about and have talked about. So a lot of you have a pretty good idea, I think, some of my views on various things. I guess my big concern about this year, because it's just an appointment from now to November, deals with the bylaw that was just passed and the policy basically to abide by the bylaw, which we really don't need, but in effect, this is what we have. I guess my number one concern, if I would be appointed, is to make sure, in effect, we abide by that. And I think, from what I've heard and read, that we
plan, and the board plans to do that. So I might say, I really don't need to be here. So, and that was a concern also about the recall. If in fact we are going to be doing that, my big concern since WUCIOA, and I've written quite a few articles about that and spoken about that numerous times, is to make sure we don't have a runaway train. And I think we're in a position where we don't. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to abide by that. So that's my number one concern. And in some ways, that's the primary reason I would want to be on the board. And perhaps, again, if the board, and from what I understand, you do plan to abide by that, I might really say, I'm not the one you want to pick to be on the board. There are some other folks with other skills that I think might be more advantageous. So I think that's about all I have to say. I have a lot of other little minor things, but I think that that's the big issue. So I'm open for questions.
Mr. President, Josh.
Hey, David.
Hello, Josh.
You've been involved in Sudden Valley for a long time.
Yes.
What's the most interesting thing you've learned through your volunteer work?
A number of things. I guess what some people see as a negative, and I might see as a positive, it's a real mix. And people that I've worked with over the years, like Mike and Leslie, and people like Larry Brown and Carol Holton, they're people that oftentimes get cursed and get demeaned and vilified. And when I've worked with them, they're all hardworking people. And I'm sure you folks are the same, all of the people that I haven't worked with before. You get into the role, and there are positions when you put on, like people have been in the military or whatever, any kind of role that you have, you put on, in some cases, a uniform, literally. Other times you put on your suit, other times you put on your hat, and you wear the role, and you embrace that. And there are things that come with it. It's easy to see from the outside certain things. And I'm sure, like people sometimes even say about the new kids on the block, the sense is once you're in that position, you see things a little differently. And there are demands that you have to live up to, and certain things that when you're walking in, I've ended up voting against measures that I proposed. Because after you hear everybody talking about those things, you say, and there are a few that jump out, I said, I was wrong, and I'll vote against my own measure. So there's some real interesting dynamics that come about, and I'm guessing that all of the folks who are, I would consider new kids on the block, are learning pretty quickly that looking at things from the outside are considerably different whenever you're on the inside. And then you feel like, listen, I'm not just looking after me, I'm looking after a bigger picture. We still all have our little selfish interests, you might say, but also you're imposed, you realize there's a bigger picture that is really important.
Mr. President, AJ.
In your answer that you just gave, you talked about voting against your own measure. We previously worked together back when you were on the board. Me and a number of property owners worked with you and Sarah Holmstrom to put forth a motion to the board to put a 7% cap. At the time, I think we did present 5%, but the percentage was up for discussion at the time. And then that the board didn't even entertain the motion. I don't even believe it was necessarily voted on. Maybe it was, I don't remember. It was a while ago. After that, you proceeded to then pass a budget kind of speaks to that. I would like to know kind of what the logic and reasoning for making a decision like that would be after you get up and say that they think the most important thing is to adhere to the 7% bylaw cap.
Well, it's interesting. I remember attending one of the Finance Committee meetings after I talked about the 7%. And there were a couple of things. One is, first of all, some people said, David, are you telling everybody that you own 3 parcels or 3 properties? One is, for a moment, anytime I voted for a particular increase, it's not quite 3 times as much, but I play a pretty good amount of money that goes into that. So whenever after extensive, whatever the Finance Committee goes through to get to the budget. And there were 2 options presented. One, the first year increase would have gone to $168, and the other was $123 or $127. For some reason I had $123 in my mind, but the dues ended up being $127. I said, I don't like either one, but certainly not the $168 a month, which would have been option 1, if I understand, would have given the 127. Now, the previous year, I guess, we had been talking about a $15 increase just for the roads. And I think one of the discussions that was presented, it says, well, wait a minute, this 127, this includes a $15 amount per month that we were talking about for the road situation. I thought, if you do that and take it back, if that would have been a special assessment, you would have 127 minus 15, which would have given us $112 a month. And I thought that wasn't too excessive. And certainly I would have liked it to have been less. Also, again, I'm giving myself 3 times that. So there is a piece of this that I'm saying, I'm interested in having some things done, and we need the money. And in some of those, I remember one of the meetings whenever we talked about this increase, and some of the folks says, we really did need an increase, even the folks that are part of the We Are Sudden Valley group, as I recall, at one of the meetings we had at somebody's home. And they said, we needed an increase. So there are some folks, even part of the, you might say the anti-group or whatever you want to call it, actually weren't against that. So, and then there was a part of it also, having been involved and seeing the kinds of deterioration that has occurred, there's this part of me that says, we really do need some improvements. I remember there were times whenever we were taken to and shown the kind of deterioration that had occurred. For example, whenever we were shown Barn 7, for those that have went through it. I mean, there were beams, what were they, 6x6 beams that were holding up the roof? I mean, there were 2 of them, you literally could run your hand between the upper part of the beam and the lower part of the beam. They weren't connected. The roof was holding up the beam. But there were some real serious issues, and then driving around and the roads and things like that, we had some significant concerns there. Whenever we had the city council members out one time talking about the roads. And they said, these roads really don't measure up to like city standards. It could cost up to $1 million a mile to have these roads done the right way. And we had 40 miles of roads, we're talking about $40 million. And the sense was there have been a lot of approaches to things that saved money, but still we had a lot of bills to pay. There's this side of me that says, as much as I like to have the limitations, as much as I know I'm going to be hit with almost 3 times what it cost, I still felt an obligation to go ahead and perhaps vote on something was a bit more than I wanted. But I felt, you know what, maybe we can bite the bullet. That didn't mean that necessarily we have to continue that level. Because one year, a while back, whenever we were looking at the culverts, we had a special assessment for 1 year. We got both a special assessment and a dues increase passed, but it was temporary. It was for the 1 year, and then that special assessment went away. So there's an opportunity, could be. I mean, because the dues go up 1 year doesn't mean they have to stay up there. We could do the same thing. I mean, there's nothing out of the picture that says the next board could bring down the dues to $100 or $95. I mean, there's nothing that precludes that. So it's not as if that's the end of, you know, a reasonable dues increases. My primary concern is that people need some sort of planning guideline, and I think that's why I was interested in some sort of cap of some sort. And again, we had talked about that 7% a while back that we worked on together. I know it's over it, but I felt that that was the best I could do at the time with regards to making a decision about the dues.
Mr. President, Andrew.
David, great to see you again.
Likewise.
What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of Sudden Valley?
I guess the nature, and that's why I bought into the place years ago. I bought it in 1990. A friend of mine bought a house out here, and he said, we were in the Navy together and in the theater together, and he says, come on out and spend a little time out here. So I came out and spent about a week looking around, and he says, why don't you think about buying out here? I thought, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Because I kind of liked, I got used to being out here. I went through flight training, Whidbey Naval Air Station, and then I came back, was on the staff there. I went to graduate school at Western. So, you know, I was sort of becoming part of this, taught at Skagit Valley College. I was kind of part of this kind of community here. And I thought, well, why not? So, but it was so beautiful. What I liked about it on the tape that I got from Roger Ufkus and Tony Neske, they talked about the undevelopment. And at that time, the sense was, it really was an undevelopment. It was sometimes it felt spooky coming up to my house at night. There were no other houses up there in Gate 5. I thought, wow, I really am. So the nature is what brought me out here. I mean, that's the first thing. And what I also like, which is very interesting, in spite of the craziness with regards to our interaction, I like the community, and I don't mind the give and take. I was a philosophy major, and the sense is some of my best friends were people that I didn't agree with, because we could have some really good conversations and, you know, about some significant things. So I really like that. What I don't like is whenever people are vilified for having different views. I think it's very healthy that we have disagreements. And because I'm kind of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, you have people with different backgrounds, you look for some commonality to develop so that you can come up with something we all agree on. I think that's really important.
Any more questions? Thanks, David.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And the next applicant will be Michael Coydal.